Hello. Today is May 8th. Welcome to Tea with Jamie. This is where I ramble on about something to do with Formula One, or multiple things to do with Formula One, for a little while each day. And today we're going to do another news review. And I've already had a little scan, so I'm kind of prepped for what we're going to talk about. And by prepped, I mean I opened up the tabs and had a look at the headlines. So it is very spontaneous here in my garden today. First things first, what do you think about the new artwork? The original artwork was so hilariously awful, I literally patched it together in about 2 minutes, if that. This looks a little better, right? Yeah? No? I think I prefer it. It's good as a placeholder. I'm not really an artwork guy. I'm an audio guy, that's my thing. So anyway, let's see what's going on in Formula One today, May 8th. Incidentally, now 2 weeks away from FP1 in Canada, almost to the minute, actually. I believe Canada's another sprint race, right? So again, with these updates not getting a lot of testing time, I'm assuming it's back to 1 hour for FP1, then we're straight into sprint qualifying. Then on the Saturday, it's the sprint race, then the qualifying for the Grand Prix, and then on the Sunday, the race. So pretty standard sprint weekend, I'm assuming, for Canada. We'll see if the timings change for the FP1, but let's go into the news anyway. So first things first, I want to talk about this. In racingnews365.com, by Ian Parks, FIA confirm investigation of controversial F1 team ownership situation. So, FIA President Mohammed Ben Sulayem's back in the news, back on the pod, and he is questioning whether it should be allowed for Mercedes to buy out a big stake in Alpine. So as you remember, Alpine are now a Mercedes-engined, power-united team, and Toto wants to buy into that team. Toto/Mercedes. So this would be a 24% stake in the team, which is currently owned by those celebs that bought into the team a few years ago. Rob McElhenney, Patrick Mahomes, Ryan Reynolds, Rory McIlroy, and I think other investors not quite so high profile as well. They put 200 million in 2023, and apparently, and this is in euros, by the way, apparently this is now worth 800 million. So quadrupled their investment in a few years. Pretty good. However, there is a rival group, consortium, whatever you want to call it, who wants to buy into that team. And this includes Christian Horner. Now, I don't know if he's leading this or he's just part of it or what, but that would still only be, less than a quarter of a stake in that team, but that's still, a lot of big chunk of power there. And so Christian wants back in. As we all know, he does. But like I say, Mohammed Ben Sulayem is not necessarily thrilled about Mercedes joining the party. I don't know if this has anything to do with his desire for Christian Horner to come back in, because he did say, I read a quote recently saying that Formula One would be better off with Christian Horner in it because he's kind of a well-known guy and he's, good on camera, I guess, and good for the branding of Formula One. There are definitely some downsides to Christian Horner. Well-documented downsides. So I'm not sure it's perfect for branding of Formula One, but he's certainly a controversial, somewhat charismatic guy, right? Christian Horner, that is. I'm not saying this is a good or a bad thing, but, he contains multitudes, put it that way. Anyway, this seems a little bit to me like the FIA president is putting his thumb on the scale a little bit here and leaning it towards the Christian Horner consortium versus the Mercedes, because this would be an outrageous double standard. If Red Bull can own two teams, why can't Mercedes? And at the end of this article, he says, I feel ownership of two teams as long as it's for the right reason. And what is the right reason? As long as you're not trying to take it because you don't want others to take it, or also get voting power when it comes to the regulations, then maybe it's okay. But then I do believe that owning 2 is not the right way. So he's all over the map. He's saying that you can own 2 if it's for the right reasons. And, I mean, Mr. Salayam, what are the right reasons? But you can't own them if it's for the wrong reasons. And for the wrong reasons is, obviously, when it comes to voting on regulations and things like that, you then have power over 2 teams. You double your influence. That's what he's saying, which is a good point, fair point. But the precedent has already been set, right, with Red Bull and Racing Bulls. So can you apply the law unequally? Is that fair? If that is the case, you either need to allow any team to do it, or you force Red Bull and Racing Bulls to part company. And even then, can you guarantee that they're still not acting together in their best interests? So, as per usual, this is about as clear as mud as to what's really going on in Formula One because, all this smoke and mirrors. And I kind of like it, if I'm honest. I like this sort of skullduggery. I think it's kind of fun. It's just another layer to Formula One. It's the same in so many sports. It's not just this sport, but there's something about Formula One that brings out the politician in many people. And there's a little bit of needle, a little bit of personal in there, between Toto and Christian. I think surely there must be, in addition to the strategic benefits, from either side. But if it doesn't work out for Christian Horner's consortium, where else can he go? I mean, I guess the idea is that he might be bringing a 12th team to the grid. That was another thing in discussion. He's clearly gagging to get back into Formula One, and so far been unsuccessful. But money talks. If he can show up with a big old stack of cash and buy his way into a team, that's a legitimate way in. Maybe. So yeah, that's that. Let's move on to Formula1.com. And this article here. James Vowles explains why Williams had quote-unquote messy winter as team bounces back with Miami double points finish. Okay, yeah, as previously stated, they did much better in Miami. Clearly the updates made a huge impact. Maybe they lost a little weight because that car is, by all reports, one of the heaviest on the grid, if not the. And they did that because they needed to pass the safety crash tests. And just to pass them, they just had to add more heft to the parts to make them pass. So let's see what James Vowles has to say. So, in explaining why things haven't gone well this season, he says, "It's tiny, small details, but hundreds of them add up. It's inefficiencies across the board that weren't taken into account and only came to light once you start stressing the system. While we started early in the wind tunnel, we did not start the build of the car early because what you want to do is keep all of that goodness in the wind tunnel as long as possible. And we wanted to stress ourselves to the point of not quite a championship team, but more aggressively than we had done before." And then he goes on to say about how complex the car is, but yeah, James, all of the cars this year are complex. Not particularly special. Sorry, that's just me interjecting my opinion. All right, back to the quote. "All of it is about 1.5 to 2 times more complex, and it didn't go smoothly for much of that process. Your reaction once that starts to happen is, there's very few alternatives. Once you start falling behind, you're in trouble." And then he talks about the crash tests and adding weight. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was a sort of downward spiral of failure after failure and mistake after mistake, and then, you're kind of in a difficult downward trajectory to turn around. So it sounds like he admitted that they were late to start making the car, right? They were testing in the wind tunnel, and they spent too long in the wind tunnel. I mean, I don't know if he's admitting that that was a problem. I think he was saying that it was intentional to stress. What did he say? This is kind of a wild quote. "We wanted to stress ourselves to the point of not quite a championship team, but more aggressive than we had done before." I mean, that sounds like an error that he's admitting to, but trying to claim some kind of, like it was admirable. I'm sorry. Like, you made a mistake. Let's not try and make a silk purse out of a sow's ear, right? So they made a lot of mistakes, and they were too late out of the wind tunnel, too late starting to build the car, by which point they realized, things are wrong. We got a budget to make this pass the safety tests. And as such, they didn't get out for the first test in Barcelona, and it's just been chasing their tail since then. And it seems like now, after race 4, they've caught up a bit. They've managed to shave off enough weight to be competitive. Even so, Carlos Sainz, after what was that Grand Prix qualifying with that quote, he was not a happy bunny. And, it sounds like I am being harsh to Williams, because I feel like they're one of the few teams that are just doing it their own way and are like one of the old school teams. Yes, they sort of buy in their engine for Mercedes, but in terms of them as an outfit, they're kind of old school. And I really like that, And James Vowles is an excellent team principal and was fantastic at Mercedes and has had his moments in Williams and clearly has a vision that is not fully being executed yet. And I think they made a big error by really selling 2026. We've talked about this, and it's been talked about ad nauseum in the press, that this is such a disappointment because they really sold this as the year where all that sacrifice was going to pay off. And I'm beginning to see some potential, right? This looks like there's some momentum. But let's go back to just this past Saturday and Carlos Sainz really railing the team on the radio and saying this is not acceptable. We need to be better than this, and saying it publicly. That's almost like a cry for help, right? Saying it over the radio. So they did manage to turn it around. Maybe the dam has broken and things are heading in the right direction now. But I kind of wish they would just get on with it. Less rousing speeches and more knuckling down and just getting on with it. And be a bit tight-lipped about it, They don't need to bare their soul in the press every 5 minutes. I mean, I guess it gets them some attention and it's good for the sponsors and it, keeps the name on people's lips, but I don't know, just get on with it, Sorry to sound harsh. So I'm not going to talk about this discussion over Red Bull targeting Piastri as Verstappen's replacement, really, because this is all just ludicrous rumour and speculation. Who knows? This may well be an intentional leak by Red Bull to put a little pressure on Max Verstappen. I'm not sure they're thrilled with the way Max Verstappen is flirting around with other teams. It doesn't make Red Bull look good. I personally don't see why Piastri would leave McLaren. I don't see the incentive there. Yeah, that's all I got to say there, because I'm really not feeling there's much of a muchness there. I feel like this is just a void in the schedule type story. So that's what I have to say about that. Okay, let's talk about Italy. So Italy, bit of a mixed bag sporting-wise, right? Didn't qualify for the World Cup. Again, by the way, which is a disaster. I mean, Italy, not in the World Cup, again. That's such a shame. However, Antonelli leading the World Championship. Sinner, a huge name in tennis. I don't follow the tennis quite as much these days, but, clearly doing well. And let's not forget, Ferrari are up there. This was the first weekend that Ferrari weren't on the podium, right? This past weekend in Miami. And Leclerc absolutely could have been. They're there or thereabouts. And with this incredible start that they have, I feel like them understanding all those updates, I feel like they fell foul of this bringing all the updates in one go thing back in Miami. And I think they sort of didn't really understand the car. So clearly they couldn't implement a lot of what they wanted to implement because, it was just too many variables in the mix, right? The McLaren did a much more sensible thing. They brought half the updates in Miami. They're going to bring the other half in Canada. And, they clearly made a step. But let's not forget that Ferrari have made a great car and they got two great drivers. And I absolutely can see them winning races. The big variable here is what's going to happen when Mercedes upgrade in Canada? Are they going to disappear and be like where they were in the first couple of races? Because they kind of stood still. Yes, they still won the race in Miami, but it wasn't a canter, right? Norris was just there. They pulled a bit on Leclerc, but like I say, they didn't clearly understand the car in Miami. They've now got 3 weeks to process all of that data and understand what those updates did and what is beneficial. I think they brought a new floor, they brought new wings, they did something with the side pods, I think. So that's a lot of car to update. And hopefully they show up, hopefully from their perspective, they show up and know what the deal is with their car. And then Mercedes are in that position of going, right, what do we have here? What do all these bits do? How does it work? This is going to be the story for me of the weekend. What's happening to Mercedes and how does that impact the McLaren and the Ferrari of it all? Because those three teams are there or thereabouts. It's hard to say where Red Bull are. I feel like they're a bit off. Verstappen, we know, can pull an incredible lap out. And they've clearly made huge gains with that steering rack adjustment. That was like a big thing that, really changed the game. But from the data that we have, at least already, it looks like those three teams are, closer than they were in Australia. Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren, So anyway, back to the Italy of it all. I'm excited for that country. I'm excited for Italy to have some energy going on, right? Because it's been the doldrums for quite a long time, particularly as it relates to motor racing. I don't think they've had a champion since the 50s. I heard that on a podcast the other day. I can't remember which one. So they haven't had a world drivers champion since the 50s. And we know how crazy about motorsport they are. So that's worse than the England football team. England haven't had a World Cup win since 66, which I think is atrocious. But going back to the 50s, it doesn't matter if you've never had one in your lifetime, I guess. It doesn't matter how far back you go. But, it just seems crazy. I'm still not convinced that Antonelli's going to do it this year, if I'm being completely honest with you. I think George, depending on how fast the car is for the remainder of the season, if the teams catch up to them or if these updates work or they don't work or whatever. But if it's between George and Kimi, I think overall, George's experience, his speed, I think will win out. But that's just a speculation. I don't obviously know. Kimi has come on leaps and bounds. Those crazy, freakouts that would happen of just youthful exuberance seem to be calming down. And he's always been fast, but now he's becoming more of a complete driver. He reminds me a bit of Max Verstappen. Less angry than Max Verstappen. When Max Verstappen started, I don't know if you remember, he was crashing into people. He binned it into Sander Vogt one year in Monaco. He was kind of a wild guy. I remember Kimi Räikkönen really laying into him, saying that he's too dangerous for F1. But it was youthful exuberance, right? Fair enough. You're a young guy. You're excited to be there. You're getting tons of money. You're racing these incredible machines. Who wouldn't be like that? So Kimi in many ways has got the speed, but not the rage, not the hot-headedness of a Verstappen. But he's still a young guy. He's still a teenager. Having said that, like I say, he has come on leaps and bounds in last year. So maybe he is a championship contender. What happens when the pressure gets to him later in the year and he's leading the championship and he's got people nipping at his heels? What happens then? What does he do under enormous pressure, not just within the team and within the sport, but with Italy on his back? That is a huge amount of pressure. Okay, this was possibly more of a ramble than usual, but I'm in just that kind of a mood, I guess. So I have another podcast to record in about half an hour, so I've got to go and take a break. This is for a different thing. This is my voiceover podcast. If you're interested, it's called The VO Breakfast Show. And I've got some voiceover to record as well. Maybe I'll do a little bit of a deep dive into all the other stuff I've got going on. If anyone's interested, I own a podcast production company and I'm a voice actor, as well as doing Formula One content. So that's what I do. We'll get into that at some point in the future, I'm sure. But anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day. It's beautiful weather here in the northeast of the US, Pennsylvania. We do have 2 more weeks to wait until there are cars on track. But that's not so bad. It's not the end of the world. Then we got a nice run of races. And maybe we get an extra race as well if they bring Jeddah back. Who knows? I think there was talk of another race potentially as well, or a race that's not Jeddah but something else. I don't know. I'm rambling. What is up with me today? Anyway, I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day, and that's all for me. Bye-bye for now. I've been your host, Jamie Muffett. You can find me on social media for more of this rambling nonsense under my name or F1_Jamie. This is an RPS audio production.